as it related to the Steve Vaus recall. And, Steve Vaus is our mayor, and, we're in this Wild West, or at least we like to think of it as a Wild West town, although it's frankly kind of posh here. In certain neighborhoods, it's very posh. In other neighborhoods, it's very, middle-class America. But, our mayor, Steve Vaus, always wears a cowboy hat. So he is something of a character in our town. A lot of people love him for it. A lot of people don't like him for it, so he is a bit of a divisive character, but generally speaking, he's got a lot of institutional support in our city. There's a lot of people that really like him. And frankly, that's why he's mayor. That's why he's been reelected mayor. But, any political figure is going to have their detractors, and that's definitely true here in Poway. Here's a comment from Pete Neal on the live stream, and he says, at one point, Poway had more miles of equestrian trails than any other city in the United States. Yeah, that's pretty cool, actually. And I know we've got so many trails, whether they're for equestrian or for hikers. Poway is a great town, a great place to raise your family. I've lived here since 1996. Really like this city. It's got an amazing history, but things are changing in Poway. Poway's growing up in a lot of ways, and that was a big part of this. So, anyways, a group of local citizens filed a recall petition of Mayor Steve Vaus. It was probably, I think, in November of last year, if I recall, right around then. And this was led by Christopher Olps. Chris Olps has been a podcast guest here on the John Riley Project twice. He's been a guest on the show. Chris in both cases, was a candidate for city council. He's very active in our community, goes to all the city council meetings, does a lot of his own due diligence. And in some ways, Chris is part of what I'll call the loyal opposition. There's a group of very vocal people here in Poway that are not happy with our city council and haven't been happy with our city council for a very long time, for a long list of reasons. And we're going to get into that. And they've been unsuccessful in trying to win election on the city council. And so when the recall notion came forward, Chris Olps is really trying to build support for the recall. And then Steve Vaus then attacked Chris Olps. Oh, he's a 5-time failed candidate for city council, because he's run, I think, 3 times, and I think he's gone for appointment twice, and hasn't been successful. Now, Chris Olps, I like Chris Olps. Chris Olps is a good guy. I mean, he's a family guy, has a long history here in Poway. He's got a good heart. Now, Chris Olps and I don't always agree on everything. There's certain things we agree on, certain things we disagree on. But when he did this recall, at first I thought, wow, this is kind of interesting, because Vaus is going to be a tough guy to knock off. I mean, here in our town of Poway, I mean, the city and the country, and the mayor wears a damn cowboy hat. So he's got a lot of support here. And Vaus has been very good at sort of building coalitions. Well, I mean, like him or not, Vaus has a lot of support and power in Poway. And so it would take a lot to recall Vaus, especially after all the unrest that went on and the grumbling that went on with the recall effort of the governor, Gavin Newsom. A lot of people were angry that there was a recall. So, and then you looked at the timing of this, and it was kind of tricky too, because, Steve Vaus's term is going to come up for re-election in November of 2022. And if the signature gathering effort had worked, and it didn't work, and we'll talk about that. If it had worked, then I think they were hopeful that there would have been a recall election in June, just 5 months before the regular election. So there was a lot of people that were questioning the timing of this. Why do we have to go through all this hoopla when we're going to be able to vote them out in a few months later, or reaffirm to vote them in? But the supporters of the recall were adamant. They believed in their cause, and they went forward with it. And they were out there hustling and building, getting petitions. But in the end, they didn't get enough signatures. So I think they needed, roughly speaking, 6,600 signatures to get the petition on the ballot for the recall. And they came up short. And the story is that they had 5,100. So they came about 1,500 short. Some people are questioning the reality of that number. I don't know. I'll take Chris Olps at his word that it was 5,100. I don't know. and he didn't turn in the petitions or the signatures because he wanted to protect them from any, retribution or protect them from any kind of blowback from city council. Like, okay, well, some people said he's built a pretty good mailing list for his next effort to run for office, which that's probably true too. Well, at any rate, the signatures weren't delivered. Now, I remember inquiring numerous times through the signature gathering effort, like, how you doing? How many signatures have you got? Not necessarily to belittle a small number of signatures, but I was always very curious to where they were, because if they were getting close to that 6,600 number, then I think they would have had an opportunity to really kind of generate some public PR and say, hey, we're only 1,000 signatures short and we only got 2 days left. We need your help. I mean, I think there was a real opportunity to do that. Now, I had invited Chris Olps multiple times to come on the podcast to talk about the recall. And both times he just didn't really seem to have interest in doing it. Kind of deflected. He was hoping someone else on his team could maybe be a spokesperson, and I couldn't find someone to speak about it. I was just interested in hearing their case. Not necessarily to debate him or argue with him. I just wanted to hear it out. Now, I've seen it written. I've heard stories. Chris shared some of those stories with me when we did the podcast episodes together. And then I've heard a lot from other people here in Poway amongst the loyal opposition, people like Chris Cruz and, Tory Powers have told stories about, how they really think Steve Vaus needs to be recalled. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go through this list in just a second, but I will say this, is that by trying to recall Vaus and failing to get signatures, well, not only does that harm the cause of the people that wanted to recall him, but now Vaus is empowered. I mean, you see Vaus on television and on social media. He's like a peacock, he's sort of prancing around. He has been empowered. And if he is running for re-election in November, which I assume he will, well, he's going to be going in there with, a tremendous amount of confidence. So now all along, I kind of have my doubts, because I love recalls. I think recalls are great things, and I love impeachments too. I love anything that can keep politicians on their toes, that will make them feel like that at any moment they could be stripped from power. I like that idea, that the people could knock them out. And it doesn't have to necessarily be during the election cycle. It could be at any time. I mean, that kind of keeps politicians like a little bit more honest. And I like that. Now, but I still had doubts if this was going to work, because in Poway, I mean, there's a lot of Republicans in Poway, and Vaus is Republican. Now, by the way, I think Poway is now roughly 1/3 Republican, 1/3 Democrat, and 1/3 independent or third party. Used to be a lot more Republican. I think since the Trump years, some of those people abandoned ship. But and I think Poway, if I recall, Pete Neal told me that Poway voted more for Biden than for Trump, which is interesting. But I still always thought that this recall effort, I get where they're coming from, but I always thought it was going to be a really tough mountain to climb here in Poway, because Vaus was just so darn popular. So I had my doubts, but I still wanted to hear them out in a podcast episode. And I was really kind of bummed that we never had that opportunity. Pete Neal on the live stream says, my question, did they pull up short intentionally to save us from the expense of the special election? I don't know. I don't think they did, Pete. I mean, I think putting so much effort into this recall and then for some reason undermining your own efforts. I mean, I can't imagine that the recall proponents would have purposefully come up short. I don't see that happening. Now, I do know that there's a lot of people that obviously signed the recall. There's a lot of other people that don't like Vaus, but didn't sign the recall petition because they didn't like the timing of it. It's just a few months away from the real election. It's going to cost more money, yada, yada. And they figured, well, we'll have our shot in November. So if they got 5,100 recall signatures, now assume every one of those is a valid signature, they'll have at least 5,100 votes against Vaus when we get into November. But I think the winner of the mayoral race is going to need at least 10,000 votes, at least. So they're going to need a lot more than that. Pete Neild also commenting here on the live stream says they did get a list of those who are not happy, valuable information for an upcoming election. Yeah, that's what I was saying. I think that list of petitions is a great mailing list. If it can be transformed into that. I don't know how many emails they got. Hopefully they did. I mean, that's, after all, Vaus has built a huge email list here in Poway, and that's how he communicates with people. But that's a list that he got from Marilee Boyack. Marilee Boyack, former city council person. She's now living in Utah. I'm a big fan of Marilee Boyack's son, Connor Boyack, and the work he's doing for Libertas Institute. He's the author of the Tuttle Twins. This kid is incredible. He's a Poway guy, Poway High guy, and he's now living in Utah. But his mom, Marilee Boyack, was on city council in Poway, built this great mailing list, and then I handed it off to Vaus, and Vaus has been able to take that and build on it. I think other political forces in our town would be wise to try to build their own lists, and hopefully that's what they're going to use this for. So we'll see. All right, so I just kind of want to go through some of these grievances, and this is kind of what I wanted to do when I invited Chris Olps on this podcast. I invited him to go through all the grievances. I'm going to kind of go through them, and I don't know to the same level of detail, obviously, as Chris Olps does, or Chris Cruz, or some of the others. I may get some things wrong, but I'll just share some of the highlights, and I'll offer some of my thoughts and opinions on them, and ask ourselves, does this meet the standard for a recall? And again, I know that's totally subjective. There is no objective means of saying this is recall worthy and this isn't. Now, in my opinion, you've got to meet a fairly high threshold to be, sort of ethically qualified for a recall. So what were they? Now, I think the main theme of this, which we're going to get to, is the fact there's been so much change in the city in such a short time, and a lot of people don't like the change. And the other kind of major theme is that there's a lot of people, at least on the recall side, that just don't like the people in power in Poway, don't like the city council, don't like their decision making, and so you got a conflict of how it's ultimately how people see Poway and what they see for Poway's future. But at the same time, there is a lot of friction between personality types. And I think that was the more broad overview of what led this recall effort. But then, of course, we'll get into specifics, and the specifics were the bullet points on why the recall proponents felt that the recall was justified. So the first one, the big one, is Steve Vaus has this fundraiser every year. It's called Carols by Candlelight. And apparently he's been doing it for like 25 years. Way before he was ever a political figure in our town. And this is a fundraiser for Children's Hospital, and he generates money for that. And he invites all of these musicians, and some of them are name acts, like from Nashville. So Steve Vaus is a country musician, by the way. He has his own kind of alter ego persona, Buck Howdy, and he's written a lot of songs, like country songs, Americana songs for kids. But he's also, as an independent artist, he's written a lot of his own solo music. In fact, he had some music that was popular amongst the Tea Party crowd, and the and sort of like the Rush Limbaugh crowd back in the 90s. I think there was one song he had, was like "Come and Take It," it was about gun rights. So he's, Vaus is a right-wing character, and that's another reason why some people don't like him, but also a reason why some people do like him in Poway. So he's got a long history with music, and he's actually won a Grammy as well, but not for music. It was actually for a children's spoken word. And his daughter, by the way, is a really, very talented young lady. And her name's Anna Vaus, and she is a musician in Nashville and releasing music. And really, I think she's developing, a certain level of fame. Good for her. So anyways, Vaus has his Carols by Candlelight event, and he invites all these musicians, and he really, goes out and gets people to buy tickets. and get sponsors and everything else. Well, the part of this that, on the surface, that sounds wonderful, right? Here's a guy and he's raising money for the kids, for Children's Hospital, for the kids that have terminal diseases. And it's about Christmas music and it's about America, country music. I mean, it just sounds nice, especially for a guy in Poway that likes to wear a cowboy hat. Well, if you kind of go one step below the surface, there's a lot of fundraising that's going on here. And in order to be a nonprofit, they've got to qualify and they've got to be able to meet certain rules. And it gets even more complicated when you're already a politician, because, are these people paying, to support the cause, or are they paying to support the politician? And so it's a lot of those sort of, blurred lines to use a kind of a reference to an old song. There's like some blurred lines there that some people are questioning the ethicalness of this, the legality of this. And it got kind of crazy. I mean, I guess there was a nonprofit entity that was created, and then somehow that got shifted in its name. And now the guy that's running the nonprofit is TJ Zane, who is on the Poway Unified School Board, who is another kind of Republican figure, the former executive chairman of the San Diego Republican Party. And he's kind of helping, kind of try to set up this legal structure. And then there's some question about, well, does all the money go to charity? Is Vaus putting money in his pocket? And he's never really saying if he is or not, isn't. Now, he's raising money for charity. If he puts some of the money in his pocket, I mean, that's kind of how he makes money. He's a performer. So I don't really have so much trouble with that. But I think you got to be really careful in how you do this as it applies to election law, as it applies to the financial paperwork. There's very strict rules on income and where it comes from and how it's coming. And you've got to be compliant with that. And so the proponents of this were challenging the legality and really the ethical basis of this Carol by Candlelight. And on one level, it's a paperwork thing, but on another level, it's a legal thing. Well, apparently, they've shown evidence, the proponents of the recall, but it just never seems to get traction. And it makes you wonder, because this thing's been going on for like 25 years. And Vaus has been a political figure in Poway for at least 8 years, right? Maybe 10 years. So he's had to file paperwork on this. And I know this kind of thing is seriously examined. And I'm sure his challengers are challenging him on this. The fact that it's gone this long and it's never been a problem makes you wonder, really, is there smoke but no fire? So that was one of the main things. And I was hoping that we'd be able to see evidence. I was hoping Chris Olps would come here and show us and make the case, because I'm still kind of questioning, it looks suspicious. I got you there. And some of the companies that are sponsoring that, are putting their name on as a gold level sponsor or a silver sponsor, whatever, they're putting big money in. And oh, by the way, those businesses happen to have business relationships with the city of Poway. So then, it gets a little bit fuzzy here. So I totally understand why people are questioning this, especially if you're one of those kind of due diligence people that are kind of always digging through the records and just trying to catch politicians on something. This looks ripe for the taking, but it is weird that it's never really been a problem so far. Okay, what else? One of the other big objections of the proponents for the recall was the fact that the water rates were going up, right? And we had a big water rate increase. There was a Prop 218. Proposition 218 gives people the ability to challenge a water rate increase. They tried to get signatures for that. They came way short for that. So there's people that are upset our water rates are going up. Now, the reason our water rates are going up mostly is because water is getting more expensive. And because they're building infrastructure, the desal plant, they're building the water recycling, that pure water initiative. And water is just generally more expensive. And so that's part of it. The wholesale costs of the city have gone up. But then there's a lot of people questioning the rate structure and how fair is it. And how much of a progressive rate structure is it? How much of a flat fee? What about poor people and living on a fixed income? Is the water rate too? So there's a lot of that kind of conversation going on. But I look at that and I say, it does suck. And actually, we're building new infrastructure in Poway for water. After that whole water crisis, that whole fiasco, when there was that rope caught in the drain, the rope that got caught and allowed stormwater, dirty water to mix with our tap water. That was ridiculous. That was horrible. It was a total failure by the city. Well, now because of that, they've got to make a huge investment into our own water infrastructure, which is a good thing. Especially here, especially amongst our friends on the left, our progressive friends are always talking about how we need more investment in infrastructure in America. And generally speaking, the opponents of Vaus typically line up as Democrats. So you would think that they would be somewhat understanding of the need to get more infrastructure. So anyways, the water rates have gone up. That's been one of their big complaints. The other one, and this is one I've talked about numerous times on this podcast, people are really pissed off about the 4-story buildings on Poway Road. And we've already seen it with the Poway Commons, right? You got that one, I think it's like an affordable senior building that was built right across the street from Taco Bell, Terrascan in Poway. And then across the street there's a whole bunch of townhomes that are going in that look like they're 3-story, or are they 4? I think they're 3. And then once they go, they've cleared the Poway bowling alley and the thrift stores, and they're going to put in a 4-story apartment complex there. But it's kind of below Poway Road. So to a car driving by, it'll sort of feel like a 3-story building. Now, if you live on the back side of that building, it's a 4-story building, not 3. So it's going to be a huge change. And so I've talked at length about this. There are a lot of people in Poway that are furious about all this development. They're furious that this is destroying our city's character, destroying the idea of a city in the country. After all, they're building all these, apartment complexes, and what the hell's going on? This isn't my father's Poway. This isn't the horse town that used the one stoplight town that we used to have back in the 60s or 70s, or however those stories go. Now, I get it. People are pissed. They're pissed about the driving on Poway Road, the traffic. Apparently, there's going to be more stoplights as a result of this. People are angry. In my opinion, this is a huge part of the reason why they want to recall Vaus. But, they had this Poway Road specific plan. It was open to the public to get input. Not a lot of people showed up. And then, we talked a lot about it in the 2018 election cycle when I met with a lot of the political candidates. And we knew back then there was going to be no setbacks, which means they could build the building right up to the edge of the sidewalk, not set back with a parking lot in front. We knew that was the case in 2018 before they began any construction. But very few people knew that. And so then once the sticks started going and the buildings went vertical, people were like, WTF? What's going on here? And so there's a lot of people that are really pissed off. I think this is one of the main reasons. Probably if you look at the 5,100 signatures, I'll bet you at least 80% of them are because of this. They're upset about the development on Poway Road. And then to a lesser degree, there are people that are upset about the development at the old Stone Ridge Country Club. Now, I personally, and this is just my opinion, I like it. I think it's a good thing. Okay, why? Okay, well, number one is I think these people that own the property, they have property rights. They have the right to build on their property, especially if they are conforming with what the zoning laws are in the city. So remember I said this podcast, I titled it Putin, Trudeau, Vaus, and Pursuit of Happiness. I think those property owners have a right to pursue their own happiness just as much as you or I do. They have a right to build on their property. They have the liberty. They should have the liberty to build on their property. I support them on that cause. That doesn't mean I like what they're building, although I kind of do, but I'll get to that. But the fact that you have the right to do it, you should be able to build what you want. Now, granted, no one's building a nuclear power plant. I mean, this is housing, and that's the second part of this. I like it because it's housing. We need more housing, people. I mean, housing prices are insane. Rent prices are insane because there's not enough inventory. This is, San Diego is one of the most beautiful places in America to live. My last podcast, I told you about my bike ride from Pacific Beach all the way up, up to La Jolla Cove. Man, on Saturday last weekend, it was amazing. This is an amazing place to live, and especially here in Poway, this is a very desirable place to be. It's got a good school district, a lot of really nice houses. And depending on your point of view, a reasonably well-run city. There's a lot of people that don't necessarily just want to live in San Diego. They want to live in Poway. And you talk to a realtor, there's like very few homes that are even available. Very few homes that are listed on the market. I mean, God forbid you're a new realtor with very little track record. You're going to have a hell of a time getting listings because all the popular realtors get it, all of them. It's really hard. And that's why prices for homes are so damn expensive. And for me as a property owner, I guess I kind of like that, but I'm a free market guy. I like the ability of people to buy and sell and build on their property. I support property rights, and I support we need more housing. Now, is that going to create more people on the road? Yeah, but I don't think it's going to be nearly as much as you think. I mean, go to any neighborhood and look around. I mean, how many cars are on the road in that neighborhood at any given time? Like, you go to Candy Cane Courts where Pete Neal lives, and on the Christmas season, that is jam-packed. But if it's not the Christmas season, I don't know how many homes are back there. How many, Pete? Like maybe 50 homes, 60 homes? It's not like there are 50 or 60 cars all at once driving around. There's very few. Certain times of the day might be a little more than others. So the people are moving into these houses. Yeah, there's going to be more people. There's going to be, like 1,000 housing units, each with, so it's going to be like 3,000 or 4,000 more people living on Poway Road. I mean, that's a lot. But I don't think it's going to be 3,000 or 4,000 more cars. Now, granted, Poway Road sucks for traffic. I used to live on the end of Garden Road. It's a long drive. And it's gotten worse. Hopefully, they're going to improve the streetlights so that there's better flow. But I'm also generally supportive of it because Poway Road was just so damn worn out. A lot of those old buildings just, it was just, Poway hadn't evolved. Poway was still stuck in its past. Now, for some people, that's why they like Poway. They like the fact that it was the city in the country, and we had a bowling alley, since the 60s, and they grew up here, and their parents grew up here. There's a lot of people like that in our town. But for me, I've lived here since '96, and I appreciate it. But really, the whole idea of a city of a country, that went out the window in the '80s. That's when they built tremendous amounts of homes. I mean, really, in the '50s is when a lot of the homes were built in Garden Road and along Pomerado Road. So the whole idea of a city in the country, in my opinion, is mostly a feel-good shout out to our past. It's not really reflective of the reality of Poway today. Yeah, sure, there's some people that have horses. Yeah, we got a rodeo. We got equestrian trails. But really, it's a suburban community. We got way more soccer moms than we have horseback riders. So Pete here on the live stream saying, 10 homes per cul-de-sac. So there's 3 cul-de-sacs. So it's like 30, plus the road joining them all. Maybe there's 40 homes back there, Pete. So yeah, I mean, you go to that neighborhood, park yourself out at the stop sign where they all come and go. 40 homes. It's not like there's going to be 40 cars, constant flow of traffic going around. So there's going to be more people on the road on Poway Road. Totally get it. And there's going to be more. But I don't think it's going to be as bad as people think. So couple more comments here. Matt Brannigan on the live stream saying, Poway Road is very scruffy. Looked like a town that had seen better days rather than an affluent suburb. I think it puts some people off. The improvements will make even Poway more desirable. Well, yeah, it was scruffy is a good word. It was worn out. Parts of it were worn out. And again, some people like that. Other people don't. So we have a difference of opinion here. A friend of mine, one of my crazy friends here up in Poway, he tells people he doesn't live in Poway. And he's got a really nice house in North Poway. He doesn't say he lives in Poway. He says he lives in Rancho Bernardo. And I'm like, why in the hell do you do that? And he said, well, when people think of Poway, they think of Poway Road, and Poway Road sucks. I'm like, really? Okay, well, first of all, Poway Road isn't that bad. There's a lot of great parts of Poway Road, but you don't live anywhere near Poway Road. And frankly, Poway has a pretty good reputation. So I think he was just kind of being silly about it. Yeah, I mean, Poway Road needed to be upgraded, in my opinion. So anyways, I think this is the driving reason why they had the recall effort, was people were really upset about all of this change in Poway. Now, in my opinion, change is good. We need to embrace change, and we need to evolve. And, we got to move into the 21st century, friends. But there was definitely a lot of friction around that. Okay, so what else? A couple more things here. There was objection to Poway having a lot more vandalism and destruction of property. This is a legit problem. We've seen buildings, like I think down at the Creekside Shopping Center, people breaking into buildings there. I know the Poway bike shop back there, they broke in, stole bikes, stole other valuables. I don't know if they got cash. A lot of damage. There's been graffiti, and there's a whole bunch of auto theft stuff going on in Poway right now. People stealing catalytic converters right out from under people's cars in the middle of the night. There are cases of people's cars being broken into. There are cases even of people's homes being broken into. And that's been an issue, not just in Poway, but in Rancho Bernardo and in 4S Ranch, where there's a group of thieves that kind of figured out a system. They know where to target the homes in the second story, where they know that the security system isn't on. And they go in the master bedroom, they take the cash, they take the jewelry, they're in and out in 5 minutes. That's like a hit ring that's going on. That's real. But you know what? There's no excuse. That's something that has to be addressed. And especially if you claim, as Mayor Vaus does, that Poway is one of the safest cities in America, or the safest city in San Diego County. And it's something he's often touted. And if we want to have a place to raise family, a quality place to live, we need to address this crime problem. But at the same time, I also know that there's crime going up everywhere. It's not unique to Poway. Now, that's not an excuse. It's just the reality. So there's a much bigger thing that needs to be fixed than just the Poway sheriff ramping up security here in the city. But the mayor, he's like the quarterback of a football team. He's going to get the blame and he's going to get the credit. That's kind of part of the game. So people are angry about all of the vandalism, the theft, the destruction of property. There's people that are one of the challenges to the recall was there are a lot of people that thought that they looked through the records and they noticed that Mayor Vaus's signature had changed on at least one occasion, and they were questioning whether the paperwork was filed legally because the signature was different. I'm like, okay, that's really, I mean, that and it's not right, but that's not worthy of a recall. That's like, the 12th point on their list, but it was interesting that it was listed. There are people that are upset about redistricting. And just to touch on this quickly. So going back, God, what was it? The 2016 election, I think, was the last year when we had citywide elections, where we had 4 city council person and a mayor, and they were all elected by the whole city. And they had a sort of a staggering thing where 3 were in one election cycle and 2 the next election cycle. So, which made sense. But then they began requiring, there were lawsuits against cities and against school districts. So they all got scared and they all implemented districting, in many cases, against their will. And excuse me, the redistricting was intended to address representation for certain minority groups. But in Poway, it didn't really sort out that way. But at any rate, there are people that were upset about the redistricting map because the one that was picked was the one that the mayor supported. Some people say the mayor drew the lines. I don't know if that's true. I know they hired a demographer to come out and try to get the population similar, the demographic profile reasonably similar. But there are people that were upset with that map. And that map does have flaws. Like the Garden Road community is cut in half. There is no district that spans all of Poway Road. Every district touches Poway Road, which some people think is a good thing, but it kind of splits up the whole South Poway contingency into separate factions. And I know that upsets some people. So there are some legitimate critiques of that districting map. And then they had to reapprove it, after the 2020 census. And they just essentially said, it ain't broke, don't fix it. And they reapproved it. Now, Poway Unified kind of did something similar with their school district map. Horribly, way worse. The Poway Unified one was ridiculously gerrymandered. This one was gerrymandered to a degree because it was drawn to protect the seats of certain city council members, because you never saw two city council members going against each other in the next election. It was gerrymandered. How badly, we can argue about that. But that was one of the critiques of Vaus. Then the other one is that he always seems to appoint sort of his cronies to some of the committees, the Budget Review Committee, et cetera. Now, full disclosure, I've been on those committees. I was on the Budget Review Committee probably 15 years ago. That was a long time ago. And then I was on the Parks and Rec Committee about 8 years ago. And some people were upset about who was being appointed, and then some people were appointed a second time. But that's just the nature of appointments to committees. They're usually their supporters, their friends, that are the ones that get appointed. So people were upset about that. But I think in the end, the real objection that the recall proponents had, if you really get down to it, is that people are just upset with all the change in Poway. They're really upset with the construction on Poway Road. To a lesser degree, they're upset about the construction at the farm in Poway. And then there are other smaller issues. There's still big issues in some people's eyes, but there are other issues that other people get fired up about. Like the water rate thing was a big deal for a very small vocal minority in the town. So what's the linkage to this? Like I said, it's Putin, Trudeau, Vaus, and pursuit of happiness. The pursuit of happiness piece that I think I made the case earlier is that property owners in Poway also should have the right to pursue their happiness. And if that means they want to build on their property, in my opinion, you should have the right to do that. Because it's not just freedom for me and not for thee, which was my critique of the Canadian truckers. We should all have the freedom to build on our property. And this is going to go further, friends. Because now they're allowing people in single family home neighborhoods to convert their lot into a 4-unit apartment building, or to build more granny flats. This is going to start building steam here, especially if we don't address the housing crisis. There's just too much of a financial incentive for people to convert their single family home into multifamily units and be able to make darn good money renting that property out, because there's such massive demand and such little supply. So we're going to see more of this. And I think creating more housing supply is ultimately good. It's good for the economy. I think right now, housing prices, as much as I love the fact my price on my home has gone up, housing prices are just way distorted. So I think, having some normalcy to that would be better. And then, imagine renting in Poway. It's expensive. How much does it cost to rent here? Like $2,500, I think, for like a 2-bedroom apartment. It's something like that. That's a lot. Especially if you are, working a blue collar job or working a job that is somewhere in the neighborhood of the minimum wage. It's tough. It really is. Housing in San Diego is just a disaster. The answer isn't affordable housing that's subsidized by taxpayers. That's not the answer. The answer is more supply. It's Econ 101. There's high demand, you bring up the supply, and then the price kind of dampens, it kind of neutralizes. And I think that's the right approach. Okay. And then, the other thing with this the other angle, which there's a little similarity between the Vaus thing and Putin, which they're not the same person. Don't get me wrong. But there's a little bit of this tribal thing going on in Poway, right? There's a tribal thing where there's sort of this loyal opposition. There's a group of people in Poway that are very vocal in their dislike with the way the city's being run. Now, granted, that's a good thing. I mean, it's good that our city leaders aren't, under some pretense that, they're glorified in their town. They should have some friction. Friction's a good thing for a politician. It just keeps them more honest. But there is a certain tribal nature of things that go on in Poway. There's a South Poway, North Poway thing that some people think is a really big thing and other people think is mostly just smoke in mirrors. Some people also kind of refuse to look at it, purposely turn the other way and say we're all one Poway. But that's a tribal angle to this. There's the tribal angle of the recall against Vaus. But at the same time, there are individual rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And I think it's good to live in a society where we have the freedom to pursue our own happiness. It's kind of like the Trump supporters that are out there on the corner of Twin Peaks and Pomerado. I love the fact that they're out there. Now, I really disagree with their message because I don't think they understand what freedom is. I think they want freedom for me, but not for thee. They want freedom for themselves, but they want a wall on the southern border. That doesn't make sense to me. But I love that they're out there. I really do. I think it's cool. I mean, now granted, there could be a bit of a nuisance and, they're all fired up for their cause and maybe you don't like the cause and you drive through that intersection on Sundays and you'll get people that are loving them or hating them. People honking horns or people leaning out their car and flipping them off. It's something. I wish the liberal friends or Democratic progressive friends would show up and retake the one corner by Jersey Mike's because there needs to be an opposition message there. I think that would be a good thing. But, does any of this, the net of this, does any of this really rise to the level of a recall for Vaus? Well, I think it's good to sign the petition. Okay, I didn't sign it. Now, I would have signed it if I would have had an opportunity to sign it, but I just never took the time and effort to go chase it down because I kind of always figured they were never going to get enough in the first place because Vaus has so much support. But if Chris Olps came here and put the petition in front of my nose, I'd sign it. Not just because I was on a podcast, but I like recalls. I think they're good. Now, does all of these violations meet the threshold to remove Vaus from office? Well, first of all, we'll never know because the recall was never approved. I don't think it was. I now, granted, I voted for the recall of Gavin Newsom, because I thought what he did to shut down parts of the economy was horrible, was tyrannical. And then, by the way, he goes and violates his own orders at the French Laundry restaurant and at SoFi Stadium for the NFC Championship game without the mask. But I thought what he did to shut down parts of the economy was just way beyond the pale. The exact opposite of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I enthusiastically signed that one and voted for the recall. But I knew also that was probably not, he wasn't going to be recalled. California was just too blue. So does Vaus get anywhere near that threshold of Gavin Newsom? No. Is it anywhere near the threshold of like Watergate? No. Now, are some of these issues legitimate gripes? Yes, I think some of them are. And I think hopefully those will get hashed out. Now, the good news is that voters will have their chance in November of 2022 to re-elect Vaus or to remove him from office. And I would hope that those people that signed the petition, all 5,100 of them allegedly, I would hope that they come out and vote against him. And I would hope that the people that supported the recall or excuse me, the people that didn't like Vaus but didn't want the recall because they didn't like the timing or the expense, I hope they vote their values too. And then let's see what happens. Vaus hasn't announced his reelection, but given that he didn't win the county supervisor seat 2 years ago, I'm assuming he's going to run again. And I'm also assuming that he's going to win again. But I will say this, he's never been more vulnerable. Not just because of the recall, but because there's such massive changes going on in Poway that a lot of people are kind of, they're sort of ruffled. Their feathers are ruffled, and some people are just not happy with the changes. So it'll be interesting to see how it shakes out. So at any rate, Chris, you're always welcome to come on the podcast and talk it out, and I'll give you fair shot at it all, and we'll have a conversation, not a debate. Just we'll talk about it. And I'll share my thoughts. You share your thoughts. In some cases, we'll agree. In some cases, we'll disagree. And in the end, I think people watching or listening to the podcast will benefit from it because they'll hear an interesting conversation, and they'll also learn more about some of these details of things that are going on in Poway that the average mom or dad that's busy with their career and raising their kids are really just not paying attention to. And I think that in and of itself is valuable. That's why I like to think of this podcast as something of a community forum. Okay. So what are your thoughts? Do you have any closing thoughts on the recall of Mayor Vaus, the failed recall of Mayor Vaus? I look forward to your thoughts and comments. You can go on my website, go to connectwithjohnny.com.